This morning I woke up with a heavy heart, troubled by what I had seen last night after watching hours upon hours of news coverage of what happened in El Paso, Texas, when an alleged white supremacist gunman went in to a Walmart, shot dead at least 20 people, injured dozens others. And it wasn't just because I felt for the families. It wasn't just because of pain caused to that community once again. But am I becoming desensitized? Are we as a nation becoming desensitized? Because my initial thought was, oh, that's terrible. And I almost wanted to move on to do something else. But then I woke up this morning and there was another shooting, this time in Dayton, Ohio. 9 people shot dead, another alleged white supremacist shooter. This is only a week after Gilroy at the Garlic Festival, when another early 20-something white male went in and shot up that Garlic Festival. What can we do about it? Beyond thoughts and prayers. Let's talk about it.
It's time for the Matt Anderson Show. Committed to encouraging, uplifting, and inspiring a generation.
My message to you is to find, take back, and keep your righteous mind.
Hey, y'all, what's going on? We're going to have a conversation today around what is happening in our nation, what's causing it, and what can we do about it. I don't want to just get on here and fuss about what we're looking at around this nation when it comes to gun violence, when it comes to mass shootings. Specifically, I want to talk about what happened in El Paso, what happened in Dayton, Ohio, and just last week, what happened in Gilroy, California, right outside San Jose at the Garlic Festival. All 3 of these shootings, alleged shooters have ties to white supremacy, young white males go in and shoot up these soft targets, families just having fun, doing what they do, hanging out, and they just shoot these things up. What is causing that? Yeah, I've heard it said that, the male brain doesn't fully develop until they're about 25 years of age. These guys are reportedly all in their early 20s, late teens. What is it that's causing this? I mean, we've always had guns. We've had guns in America since the founding of America. There's more than 1 gun per citizen in the United States of America, more than 300 million guns here. So is it gun control? Is it is it the foods we eat? Is it drug addiction or abuse? Is it mental health? Is it all of these things or something else? What do we do to change this? Let's have this conversation. My worldview is one from a biblical worldview. I believe that my roadmap, my architectural diagram to build my life, live my life is based on the Bible. That's what I believe. I'm not going to beat you over the head with it, but you will hear conversations and comments and concepts that come from the Holy Bible in this conversation. I welcome your comments. I want you to go ahead and subscribe. Go ahead and chime in the conversation on the comments. Like if you're on Facebook. Let's have this conversation. Let's try to be respectful if we can. Let's do the best we can. I know our nation is hurting. I know we as individuals are frustrated with where we are, but I believe that we can do better if we have a common denominator of respecting one another's humanity, even when we differ, all right? The Bible says this: death and life are in the power of the tongue. It also says that the worlds were framed by the word of God, meaning that God puts power in words. There's worlds to shape our very existence by what we say. But what happens when those words are negative or destructive, and they come from individuals in positions of authority in our lives? A parent, a spouse, a leader of a nation. They carry weight. When you turn on the TV, when you turn on social media, when you listen to the radio, and all you hear over and over and over again is a negative thing about that people group, the other. It's them. They're taking us down. And it's all rooted in fear. The Bible says that God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power, love, and a sound mind. When we lose a sense of power, when we function from a place of hate or fear, and when our mind is not thinking correctly, all of these things set up for a foundation of destruction. It's a dangerous place to be when you function out of hate, fear, not thinking straight. It's a dangerous place to feel powerless, especially when you come from a culture that historically has governed, conquered, colonized the world. Now, again, let me preface what I'm about to say by saying that I'm not suggesting that all people of European descent are bad, or all black folks, brown folks are all good. That's not what I'm suggesting. This is a simple sociological, historical, cultural lesson based on facts. Do your research if you're not sure. I've been studying this stuff for 40 years, so I get it. In every nation, the colonization of nations around the world has been rooted or emanated from primarily England, Portugal, France, Spain. If you go far enough back, you can go back to Italy's, goals with the Romans and the Greeks. You go back to that kind of stuff, and you look around the world, and there's a reason that people are speaking English. There's a reason that people are speaking French, that people who are of darker hue and African descent or indigenous peoples are speaking French, Portuguese, English, because those European nations decided to be conquerors and colonizers. They were in business to make money and to take over and to influence the world with their thinking and their ideology. Well, statistics show, research shows that in America to date, people of European descent, white folks, have been primarily the largest population in America. Well, that number is changing. Based on these statistics, it looks like about probably 20 to 25 years that they will become a minority in the next 20 to 25 years. So what does that do to voting blocks? What does that do to buying power and education and neighborhoods? What does that do to intermarrying? If a white person marries a person of color, that child inevitably is going to be a child of color. What happens when every person of color marries every person who is white? Does the world become darker? Is it fear of a black planet? Is it fear, as Dr. Frances Cress Welsing would call it in the ISIS paper? She called it a fear of genetic annihilation. Is that fear power, love, sound mind? Remember that? God has not given us a spirit of fear, power, love, and a sound mind. Is that fear something that's causing individuals to profess, proclaim, promote an image of the other? They're the bad guy. Now, again, my point is not to say us or them. My point is just to do an analysis, and then we'll have a conversation around it. And I think that we need to, first off, have a unified look at our common humanity. And when we can live next to each other, shop next to each other, worship in the same place, even if we don't have similar belief systems, if we can at least respect one another's humanity, I think that we can start to heal. But as long as we start to hear this purported and promoted negativity about the other, we're going to always have this kind of thing happening, especially with minds that are not fully developed. Here's part of my analysis. Here's part of my theory. I've heard it said, and research has shown that the mind of young males does not fully develop into a mature state until they're about 25 years of age. It's interesting that most of these, about 99% of all mass shooters have been young white males, or males, even if they're in their middle age, have not emotionally or intellectually fully developed. So they're impressionable, at at Mother Emanuel down in South Carolina. I was down there last year as part of the 3-year commemoration of that service, of that event before special service. And I stood in the spot where several people had been shot dead by this young guy. The shooter in this El Paso case, 21-year-old guy with ties to white supremacy and that kind of hateful ideology. The individual who shot up the Gilroy Garlic Festival, another young white male. Same thing that's alleged to have taken place with 9 people at the time of this recording who've lost their lives in Dayton, Ohio. Young white male. What's the common denominator here? No, all white folks are not bad. Absolutely not. No, I'm not suggesting that. But it's interesting. Here's part of my theory, that the kinds of things that we ingest affects what we digest and how we digest it, and then how we behave. What we believe is how we behave. Our beliefs are based on our, behavior. Our behavior is based on our belief system. Our behavior is based on our belief system. So there have always been guns here. What's different? There's always been drugs here. What's different? Back in the 60s and 70s, we had drugs. You had the free love situation. You had LSD, marijuana, cocaine, heroin. You had all these other kind of drugs. What's different now? Okay, you could say we got opioids now. Okay. None of these cases have proven to be that individuals who are using those kinds of drugs committed those crimes. What about food additives? And you say, nah, foods can't be it. Nah, food doesn't bother you. Well, why is it that when you go to a physician and you've got a medical condition, you go to a doctor and you ask, the first thing the doctor asks, after, where does it hurt? After that question is, what are you eating? What's your diet like? What did you have for breakfast? What did you have for dinner last night? There's a reason they won't prescribe you a drug to help heal what ails you until they find out what you're taking in, because it could have an adverse reaction to the things that you already have inside of you, the chemical makeup of the foods that you're digesting. What about the movies and TV shows and radio shows and music that we listen to? You say, that doesn't bother me. That doesn't affect me. I make my own decisions. No, watch this. There's a reason that big business or advertisers spend potentially $3 million for a 30-second TV commercial during the Super Bowl, because why? They're going to give you that particular game is going to give potentially millions of people access to information about their product or service, eyeballs and ears. They know that they've got to spend a bunch of money influencing you based on emotion, bypassing intellect, to get you to think a certain way so you can buy their products or services. You can eat the foods, you can wear the hairstyles, you can drive the cars. Add to that, potentially, video games. Video games, it's just a game. Grand Theft Auto, Call of Duty, these gun-driven, kill as many people as you can, commit crimes type based games. Okay, if it doesn't have an effect on you, then why do law enforcement and aircraft or airline pilots practice on things that essentially are video games, on things that are basically simulators to real life situations? And so what happens is, when you're practicing on those real life situations, it allows these airline professionals and law enforcement professionals to deal with real world situations or simulations, so they don't have to put anybody in real life in real danger. So when they go out into the real world to protect and serve and to keep people in the air from crashing, they know how to respond in a difficult situation. So they know that there's an effect, there's potential, there's a real world usefulness in these kinds of games, or in these kinds of simulations, which essentially are basically just big, giant, expensive video games. So what happens when all you do is watch video games, violent video games all day? Your mind hasn't been fully developed. You're under 25. You're eating nothing but junk food all the time. And then the people or the person that you consider to be a father figure or an authority figure, the head of state, the head of a nation, the supreme leader, is constantly saying those S-hole countries, the invasion from below the border, those are thugs, rat-infested and roach-infested neighborhoods. What happens when you hear that? And again, this point is not about right or left or even white or black. It just happens to be those are the methods that are being used by the devil, the enemy. I'm not suggesting any people group or person is the devil. We all have a propensity to be influenced by demonic or evil influences. Choose ye this day whom you will serve. We all have a choice to choose. We have a choice to access to information and make a decision. But there are extenuating circumstances that can influence our decision-making and behavioral process. Fear of a black planet. Now you've created this whole generation of 18 to 25-year-old, not fully intellectually developed young males who are fearful that they won't have a place of power and position or influence or significance in a world that is nothing like that of their parents or their grandparents when America was great. I want to hear your comments. I want to hear your conversation. Talk to me about what you're thinking. Subscribe if you haven't done that. If you're on YouTube, if you're on Facebook, go ahead and like the page, or go ahead and have a conversation, chime in. Let's be respectful, though. Let's try to appreciate one another's humanity. I've got a couple of suggestions. First off is, how do we get past this fear of the other? Grouping a people group into an area and say they're all like that. Well, one of the things is we've got to see the common humanity. We all want what's best for our children. We want to have great relationships. We want to be healthy. We don't want to struggle with bills. We want to, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. We all want that. I don't care what color you are. I don't care where you come from. Everyone wants that. That's a common human denominator. Look at little children, 3, 4, 5 years old. Look at them. They're all the same. I don't care what color they are. They're all fun, laughing and funning and jumping and running and playing. I don't care what country they're from. They all do the same thing. That's where we start as human beings. So if we start there with that conversation, meaning if we go to the basketball game and our child plays on a basketball team or whatever kind of sports team, and we go to the game and there's a parent there who's of another cultural background, why not have a conversation with them? The common denominator is our children. We both want our kids to win or do well in sports. We want them to do well in school. Have a conversation about that common humanity. A lot of this other fear of the other is based on ignorance. We don't know each other. So many people have been influenced by the negativity of the other, and they don't have critical thinking skills, or they choose to avoid thinking critically because they're functioning out of fear, as opposed to saying, hey, the world's changing. Let's respect one another. Let's appreciate one another. Let's work together. Let's figure out how we, as a collective of humanity, can live together not only in peace, but in mutual respect, even when we don't agree, as opposed to living in a place where everything's dangerous and they're the other. Final thoughts here on just some practical steps to take in, because again, we're not living in Kansas anymore. It's another place now. Is practicality in terms of going into places where there are large groups of people, the mall, going into, I hate to say it, even churches. I mean, concerts, restaurants where there's a lot of people. Do you know where the exit is? Do you know where another exit is? Secondly, are you aware of the behavior of people around you? Okay, say for instance, it's, 95 degrees outside and somebody walks in and they're wearing a heavy coat and they're mean mugging, and everybody else in the environment you're in is laughing and joking and having conversation with the people that they're with. But there's one individual comes in and they're mean mugging and wearing a hot coat. That's a little odd, don't you think? Again, I don't want us to get into this whole barbecue Becky thing where we're just calling the police and calling authorities on people all the time just because they look a little different. But it's using sense. I realize sense is not common. If it was, more people would have it. Sense, there's no such thing as common sense. More people would have it. Most people would have it. I'd say most people don't. But thinking in a way that is practical, being able to see somebody and say, you know what, something's not right here. Okay, thinking about that. Are they dressed unusually? Do they look out of place? Not just based on race, but their whole demeanor. Is it something that's unusual? Talking to someone in authority there, maybe security or an employee. Hey, this person looks a little strange, a little odd. Can you or someone go and have a conversation with them that may diffuse something that could go wrong? Then also is analyzing some of your friends and family and colleagues, their social media postings, their behavior at work. We just saw there was a mass shooting not far from here in Maryland. Guy went into a store up here and shot up a bunch of people. There's a thing down in Virginia, about a month ago. Guy went into a government building and shot the place up. They believe he was a disgruntled employee. You don't know what people are going through emotionally. You don't know what people are going through intellectually and psychologically. Now, again, I'm not suggesting you got to be a psychologist or a psychiatrist, but again, sometimes it's just the common denominator of humanity that somebody cares. Do you care about what they're going through as they suffer in silence? It may diffuse the whole situation based on you saying, hey, how you doing? How can I help? Simple things like that. So I invite you to go ahead and, chime in with your comments. I got a lot more than I could say. I could go on and on and on about this thing here, but I just really believe that we wrestle not against, flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against spiritual wickedness in high places, against the rulers of the darkness of this world. That's what Ephesians says. There's a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes that we can't see that influences us. And what happens? We get mad at what we can see, and we respond to what we can touch and respond with, whether it's self-destructive or whether it's destructive outside. So when it comes to these mass shootings, unfortunately, I'm very concerned that we haven't seen the last of it. And the words that come out of positions of power, be they business leaders, parents, employers, presidents, carry a lot of weight. And we've got to be very careful what we say and how we say it and to whom we say it and from what heart that we say it. Amen? That's my story, and I'm sticking to it.